You're listening to WCOM LP 103.5 FM Carborough and Chapel Hill. It's a Tuesday, it's 5 o'clock, and that only means one thing. It's time for another round of Snarky Faith with your host, Stuart Deloney. This is a space where we irreverently wrestle through life, culture, and spirituality, all with our heads in the clouds, our tongues in our cheeks, our hearts in our sleeves, and our feet on the ground. At Snarky Faith, the questions or even the answers are never the point. It's all about the conversation. So here's your host, Stuart Deloney.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to another round of Snarky Faith Radio. I'm your host, Stuart Deloney. And, oh my gosh, dear sweet Lord, what a week it has been here in America. To say that I begin the show with a heavy heart is an understatement. And unless you've been hiding under a rock somewhere, we know that we don't know. We are just simply in a state of mourning over the school shooting in Florida that happened last week. As a citizen in the community, as a father of four, all of this is just horrendous, and it breaks my heart for all of those that were involved in this, for the parents, for the students, for the losses, for the communities, for America. I continue to just have this thing in the pit of my stomach that continues to just make me feel sick. That we continue to have gun violence here in America. That in many ways, this has become the new normal for us. That this is just the present reality that we live in. And I, for one, am someone that does not want to accept this as the new reality. Living in America. That this is something that we're going to hear about week in and week out. Something needs to be done about this. Something must be done about this. And as I just sit here just trying to wrap my head around all of this, whether it be just from the grief, from the anger that's within me, for the loss that people are experiencing, one thing I want to come back to is this. And it's something that I've seen online. I mean, I've been reading through forums and posts and articles and all of this. And I just continue to come back to seeing such a divided America. And my problem with all of this is, how can we be divided over the fact that kids keep getting killed? And we're divided because everybody wants to place blame here, there, and everywhere else. And it's the same thing that happens every time we have a mass shooting here in America. We go into blame mode for this. And each side stands where each side always does and points the finger at each side. And eventually something else happens. The news cycle continues and we forget it. But we can't forget this. We can't brush this aside. We can't just let the news move on from this. Because through all of this media distraction within this, at the core of all of this, people's children are dead. There are husbands and wives that don't go home from work that night. There's kids that don't come off the bus in the afternoons. There's lives that are lost. And I know it's very easy to rush into a debate, a gun control debate on this, which I am fully and wholeheartedly around. But you are listening to a show called Snarky Faith, so I will try to package and contain my grief and anguish and also snark and vitriol into something that I've seen that outside of all of these conversations that are happening, something that continues to just make me angry and sick. And I'll just go ahead and put this on one dude. And it's not this dude's fault, but I began to see this as many people, these many Christian conservative gun lovers' response to this wasn't about the fact that a mentally unstable 19-year-old was able to buy a rifle. It's not about gun control. They had to go and make it about themselves. Now, Brian Fisher is a conservative radio host. And if you do any digging into his background, he's all over the board, nutter conspiracy, especially just way conservative Christian. And he posted something on Twitter, which just infuriated me. And I wouldn't have even really mentioned this if I hadn't seen iterations of this posted elsewhere by Christians I know and some Christians I don't know. But I'll go ahead and read what he said. He posted this after the shooting. Hey, here's an idea. Why don't we pray in schools before these shootings happen instead of waiting until we have dead students? Why does someone have to die before we even start talking about prayer? This is the 19th school shooting this year. What do we have to lose? Now, for those of you that don't really know Christian culture, what he's really bringing up is the fact that a lot of Christians are using this as a reason to say all of this is happening because we took prayer out of schools. I saw many Christians posting things like, what do we expect? Because we don't even let God in the schools anymore. And on a cultural level, on a theological level, and even on a personal level, things like this are so damaging and asinine in the wake of grief that's going on here. Because when you have people that are blaming this shooting on the fact that we don't, quote unquote, allow God in schools anymore, is crazy. And I want to break this down just a little bit. First of all, my main argument to this, to begin with, irregardless of the shooting, is the fact when people say, well, they don't let prayer in schools anymore. Any sensible person of faith knows that you can't control when and where you pray. And they're hearkening back to a time where they almost had forced prayer in schools, which I actually don't think we need to have institutionalized prayer in schools. Actually, matter of fact, most of the institutionalized prayers we have in church are just for pageantry. You can't take prayer out of anywhere. And if you honestly believe God is the God of the universe, then God is omnipresent. How can God not be in the schools? It's a false correlation to what they're talking about. And I want to say it ends up just kind of being an evil Christian response to a tragedy. Because what they're asking for is they want to hearken back to a time that they feel they had loss, where schools were more Christian, or do they just seem more Christian? Because if you're going to run on this whole like string of logic here, oh, God didn't stop the shooting in the school because God's not allowed in schools anymore. I mean, what are we talking about? Is this like, are we going like, is God like a vampire? Like, if anyone's watched anything, the whole like pop culture code to this. If you've ever watched any vampire movie or vampire show, it's that vampires aren't allowed in a building unless they're invited in. So are we saying God is a vampire and applies to these kind of ridiculous made-up rules? And furthermore, God wouldn't stop a shooting like this because he's angry that they don't have prayer in schools now? I mean, if that's the God that Brian Fisher and these other conservatives follow, he's a pretty petty SOB. I mean, how petty would that be of a supposed loving God if because we don't have prayer in schools, so God allows this to happen? And to people like Brian Fisher or the other conservatives saying this, shut the up. Just shut up. I mean, sometimes it's better that you say nothing and shut your fat mouth because the God that you're talking about isn't the God that I follow. Humans are broken. Sick crap happens all the time. But let's not make this some sort of a petty, vengeful thing that God is doing. Like, oh, you didn't invite me to the party? Well, I can't be held responsible for what happens in the party. People like him are sick, are sick. And whatever idealized God they have is also very sick. And I'm not talking about the God of the universe. I'm talking about the God that they've put in a box, the God that they say that they follow, the God that hates the people that they hate and celebrates only the things that they celebrate. And situations like this speak they speak to the sickness of evangelical Christianity. That you're going to use a situation like this to prop up your anger that our nation doesn't look like the way you want it to look. Because people like this believe their gods, follow their own hateful, bigoted, narrow-minded, ungraceful, unloving, uncompassionate, narrow worldview. And it's terrible. Because the only thing I can come back to in these situations where I really just don't have many words to say. If you want to pick someone to point a finger at in this, if you want to pick something, especially politically speaking, what's wrong with our country and our government, the first place you should really start is the NRA, the National Rifle Association. And not even the NRA completely. But the fact that the NRA has our representatives in their pockets. And I'm coming at you from Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And I'm going to read off this list. And this list comes from the New York Times. From senators and congressmen whose major donors are the NRA. And two of those from the Senate are from our state of North Carolina. So top on the list in the Senate, John McCain has received over $7 million, either through donations or spending to benefit him and his campaign. Number 2 on that list is John Burr from North Carolina. $6,986,000 in blood money. Because the NRA is protecting the gun industry. And they don't care about our children. Senator Roy Blunt, over $4 million. Tom Tillis, also from our state, $4,418,000 in blood money towards his campaign. Cory Gardner from Colorado, $3,800,000 in change. Marco Rubio from his own state where this happened, over $3 million. Joni Ernst from Iowa, over $3 million. Rob Portman from Ohio, over $3 million. Todd Young from Indiana, almost $3 million. Bill Cassidy, almost $3 million. And in the House, We have French Hill from Arkansas, over $1 million. Ken Buck, Colorado, $800,000. David Young, Iowa, $700,000. Mike Simpson, $385,000. Greg Gianforte, $344,000. Doug Young from Alaska, $245,000. Lloyd Schumacher, $221,000. Bruce Polquin, $200,000. Pete Sessions, $158,000. And Barbara Comstock from Virginia, $137,000. Now, I'm not taking the blame away from the shooter. These people are that do this, whether it's Vegas, whether it's Charleston, whether it's Florida. We have sick individuals. But the issue with our government is sick individuals shouldn't have access to these guns. And these assault-like rifles shouldn't be so easily obtained. And I know when we delve into the deep waters of what it would take to be able to have an honest conversation around gun control and gun reform in America, I know it just devolves into partisan politics. But why couldn't we simply regulate guns in the same way that we regulate our vehicles? Where people have to register the purchase and sale every time of a vehicle. We pay taxes to be able to own these things, like we do cars. Where if we use this object like we do a car, unlawfully, we are fined. And much like DUI, DWIs with cars, there are times when we say, no, you're not allowed to have a car again. I think we should be able to say to certain people, especially people that are mentally ill, people that are domestic abusers, that no, you have lost your right to be able to own a gun because of the things that you've done. You have a rap sheet. You have lost your right to be able to own a gun. These are sensible things. These are sensible things that are simple. But we don't do that. Other countries have stricter gun control and stricter gun laws. But everyone harkens back to the Second Amendment, which is the right to bear arms. But that one word is what keeps coming back in my head, the right to bear arms. And I think we should have rules, just like we do with driving, that if you're not living up to these rules, you no longer have the right to do this. And I'm not versed on legislation. I don't know enough to really speak more informed in this, but as a citizen, as a father, and as a husband, there should be some simple common sense things that we can do that I even believe lawful gun owners could easily agree to. But what tends to happen in our government are these things, are these kind of reforms, they die because of lobbyists greasing the pockets of our representatives. And it's sad, and it's sick, and it's heart-wrenching. And something needs to be done about this. We continue to see a pattern of this happening over and over again. I do not want this to become the new normal, and I do not want a world like this to be the world that my children inherit. We need to be able to have a way to simply break this pattern. A reasonable way where reasonable people for both sides of the aisle can come together and say, I don't want my children to fear for their lives when they go to school. I mean, hell, high school is hard enough on its own. But something needs to be done. Something needs to be done. And thoughts and prayers are not enough for these kind of a thing. Because if we have the solution sitting right in front of us as cognizant human beings, to pray to God to fix something where all of the pieces for us to fix them are sitting right in front of us makes no sense. We have the answers. We have the data. We have the ability. We have the means. We have the government that should be able to fix this. But sadly, we don't. So, in many ways, for those of us that are hurt and broken and enraged with all of this going on, it should make us look forward to becoming more engaged in the 2018 midterm elections. If people are not willing to stand up for our children, and I don't care what political party we're talking about here, we're just talking about humanity. We're talking about what it means to be American. Get out and change things. Get out and vote these people out that are unwilling to do the right thing for their constituents. Because this is sick. And with Christians that try to use this as some sort of propaganda tool to be able to grind their axe over the fact that quote unquote God's not letting the schools anymore. My answer to them is just shut the hell up. You're irrelevant. Shut the hell up. You are selfish and self-serving. And to circle back to what I said at the beginning of this, you can't take God out of schools. You can't take prayer out of schools. It's an asinine statement. And to make it makes you a fool. But I don't want to keep us down in the dumps too much and harping too much on how so many of the conservative evangelical Christians have their heads up their asses. I want to say something that I actually found very interesting that gave me a little bit of hope, and I thought it was interesting. And it doesn't involve me trashing Christians. What? And this comes from the Church of England, and the Church of England issues a Lent commandment to reduce plastic waste. So something for us to give up during Lent is to do something for the environment. And I know that even may seem like a little trite and small, but I love being able to see this period of Lent used for something good. And for all of those conservative Christians, how about giving up being an a-hole for Lent? Conservative Christians would probably balk at the idea of Lent to begin with. And the idea of giving up guns for Lent, that's not going to happen because somehow in those crowds, they trust their gun more than they trust their God. And it's as simple as that. They trust their guns more than they trust their God. And Jesus would be appalled at all of this. So let's move to a lighter tone in this show. I'm sorry. My grieving will continue, but the show must continue to move on. You guys heard from me a while back. We were helping out documentarian Christopher Maloney with his film In God We Trump. Had him on the show, got his Kickstarter campaign funded. He went around the country interviewing people in the wake of our election, especially focusing on the fact that evangelical Christians, by and large, were the folks that put Trump in office. Trump, a man that looks nothing like Jesus or like nothing that evangelicals would say, seems to hold Christian values in any capacity whatsoever. In any capacity. You may could go as far to say he seems very anti-Christ, but I'm not really going to fully go there. It was just a play on words, folks. But I was able to track down Chris to sit down with him and talk through his film and its release now into film festivals, which is really exciting and awesome. And on top of that, guess what? yours truly shows up in the documentary. Now, don't let that be a reason that you don't watch it. It's very good, and it's a fascinating insight into really the ethos of our country and really the ethos of evangelical Christianity and what went into getting this orange Oompa Loompa into office, especially with all the chaos that's ensued on a daily and weekly basis that we now live in. So, thanks, evangelicals. I'll tell you where you can stick it, and it's not the White House, because there's so much crazy crap that continues to happen. But thankfully, Chris had time in his busy schedule, and his film is going to be premiering at the Big Sky Festival this next week. And actually, this week at the Big Sky Festival. They're premiering it, on President's Day. And Chris was graceful enough to sit back down with us. And so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hop in to our chat, our conversation that we had. So enjoy that. And I'll catch you guys on the flip side of that interview. So I'm sitting here again with Christopher Maloney. You guys may have remembered I've mentioned him and his film In God We Trump several times on the show. It's been a while since I've actually done this on the air with Chris. Last time we talked to him on the air, Chris was getting his Kickstarter campaign, or trying to get his Kickstarter campaign funded for his documentary In God We Trump. And now we're on the other end of it. The film is done. The film is in festivals. So I wanted to bring Chris back on the show to be able to kind of talk. Let's just kind of sit down and talk about the whole process and where all of this is going. So, Chris, thank you so much for being back on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, Chris, like where we last left you, you were so close to getting your Kickstarter. So talk us through the process of you kind of finishing that and then actually starting the process. Because with Kickstarter, it's like, yay, this is great. I'm funded. Now what? So, yeah, take us through like a little bit of the process.
Yeah, I was pretty close when we last talked, which I think was in May, almost June, maybe. Mm-hmm. So we did raise the rest of the money, and then I started filming right away. So I did this big trip where I drove down through the South, down through the Carolinas, all the way to Alabama, and interviewed a lot of people along the way, and also took another trip to Washington, D.C., where I interviewed a couple people there. And then pretty much had all the filming done by... It was fast. I think all the filming was done by the end of July. Mm. And then I edited over the summer and finished in September. So it was really, really fast. Mm. But so it's been done since then, and now people are starting to see it. So that's where we are.
Well, first of all, congratulations from finishing the Kickstarter campaign to actually getting it done and being where you're at right now, because that's no small feat. Where you started with an idea, and now look where it is.
Yeah, when I started, it was kind of like I had to do something with all the anger and disappointment I was feeling. I just had to. I figured maybe I would just put together some footage and connect the dots for my own edification and my own process of kind of grieving through the election. And then I kept waiting for like a better filmmaker to come along and tell the story, and nobody did, so I just kept going. And now it's done. And I think I was just willing to do it. And that's why it's around it all.
Well, so for those that may have not caught our last episode, can you give us just like, what is your like synopsis of the documentary In God We Trump?
It's basically an examination of the mutually beneficial relationship between evangelicals and Donald Trump, and how specifically their support led him to the very unlikely victory of being president. Without their support, and I should say that white evangelicals, by the way, it's not usually people of color who line up behind him so readily, but white evangelicals, if not for their support, he would not be president. And so it's a look at why they lined up behind him, why they connected and what each group is getting out of that relationship.
Well, you'd mentioned too, in how you were expressing this, that a lot of this was your journey of trying to process through essentially what the hell happened,
Right.
or how did we get to this place, and in you going out and driving around the country and talking to different people, what did you learn? Because that's a journey in itself, just going and talking to all these different people.
Yeah, one of the things I learned, or one of the things that came from that personal side of the journey, was that I met so many other people who were still firmly consider themselves Christian, even though they had nothing to do with the group of evangelicals that elected Donald Trump. So it's like evangelicals in America has become a political group, and then Christians are an entirely different thing. So I haven't really gone to like a brick and mortar church for the last couple of years, so I felt like I still have my Christian faith and my beliefs, but I had been away from it long enough to not really still know that there were so many like intelligent, compassionate, justice-minded Christians out there who were as upset as I was. So probably the best thing for me personally was to meet so many of them and to feel like I can still call myself a Christian without having to be embarrassed because of what it's become, like how it's been branded here in America.
And when you were, because we've had conversations on our own off the air in between this time, and I want you to talk a little bit about, because your goal initially was to be able to talk to conservatives and folks that are kind of outside that label, maybe. Yeah. And when I've watched the film too, and it's really, really well done. And did you have a hard time getting conservatives to talk to you? Talk a little bit about this, because I know, but they don't know. Yeah.
I tried my damnedest, really, to not only a conservative, but somebody who's in that group that we're critiquing, somebody who believes that it was their Christian duty to vote for Donald Trump because he was God's choice. And that is not an uncommon belief in that group. That's very common with them. I mean, it sounds crazy, but in that bubble, it's a very core belief. So I tried very, very hard to pull in a Christian who voted for Donald Trump because of their faith to just talk to me about it. And I couldn't find a single one. I talked to a lot of them, but none of them would do an interview for the film because they criticized me as being part of the liberal media, first of all, which I guess is true, but they don't know me enough to know that's true. And I wouldn't have treated it like that. I mean, I would have just let them speak for themselves. I talked to a lot of people who fit that, but who would not speak to me. And I think it's because it's really easy to get behind somebody who's so unsavory when you're part of a group and you're part of that kind of mob mentality. But when you extract someone from that and ask them to just speak to you as an individual, it's really not as fun if you're not part of the mob anymore to just sit and explain yourself. So I think that was part of it. But I ended up not finding a single person who would agree to talk to me on record.
So how have you grown in the process of going through all of this?
Well, I think I've actually, I think I told you this actually during the production of the film, but I'm more excited about my faith than I think I've ever been. And I had become so disenchanted because of how Christians have become, evangelical Christians have become such a political force here in America, and have become such like just a synonym for like extreme conservatism, that I didn't even want to align with the faith at all anymore for a while. But now it's so clear to me, clearer than ever, what Christianity is and what it isn't, and how it's being used for power and influence by some people. But to me, that doesn't strip away what it is at its core and what it is actually, and what the ministry and life of Jesus actually was. So now that I've kind of like cleared through all that crap and gotten back to the basics of it, I'm just really excited to study it more and learn more about how to follow it.
Well, and I know, like, anytime you're doing a project of this nature, it ends up being a kind of a snapshot in time for you, because especially when you're editing, you have to finish editing to finish the film. But so much has happened with Trumpiness and whatever alternative, bizarro world that we find ourselves living in America these days. Is there stuff that you're kind of like, as you're thinking through this, going like, oh, I wish I could have added this now. Oh my gosh,
Yes, yeah. The biggest thing I wanted to add was the Senate race with Roy Moore in Alabama, because that was such a little like a little tiny example of what Trump and the evangelical relationship was, and it spread to that particular Senate race, because I mean, he was allegedly and probably had sexually assaulted all these young women, but because he was still under the label of Christian, he had huge support, especially from like the religious communities in Alabama. And it was a little microcosm of what happened with Trump. It didn't really matter who he was or what he had done. If he says he's a Christian, then that's enough for them to throw their support for him. So I wanted to be able to include something about Roy Moore, but since it's about a sitting president, I had to just come to a point where it's like, that's the story. I can't keep up with it anymore. And the truth is that not enough has changed for me to change the film itself. I mean, obviously more crap comes out every day from the White House, but as far as like the relationship between especially like prominent evangelicals and Donald Trump, that has remained what it is in the film. So like, Pat Robertson plays a big part in the film, and recently he had a stroke, and then I thought, I hope he doesn't die, because then it's going to make like our critique of him in the film look quite
That's so funny. It's almost like you're praying for him. Like, come on, Pat, you got to pull through here. We need you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Different reasons than the viewers of 700 Club are praying for his recovery. But the Roy Moore thing was the biggest thing that I would have included, but couldn't. And I was very surprised, actually, that Roy Moore lost.
Yeah, I was too.
He fully embraced Trumpism. And I was just setting myself up for another disappointing election night. But that was definitely a glimmer of hope. And the other cool thing is that one of the guys I interviewed in the film, Dr. Wayne Flint from Alabama, he and Doug Jones are close friends and associates. So he was there's sort of a connection to the film with Doug Jones, anyways.
And so what has been the reception thus far for you?
It's been positive. It's been good. It's been, even for people, so a lot of people, especially people who didn't grow up in the church like I did, a lot of people had no idea of this connection between evangelicals and politicians like Trump, and how they've been kind of headed to in this direction for a lot of years. So for that group of people, they see something like the underbelly of America that they had no idea was going on. And then for people like me who did grow up in the church, it gives them like a tangible thing to see all the dots connected and to understand kind of how we got here. But it's been a good thing. It's been a really good thing. It's started a lot of conversation, which has been great. All the screenings that I've gone to, there's always a huge time at the end where everybody wants to talk about all the stuff brought up in it, which is what I wanted to happen. So it's been a positive reception so far.
And one thing I know that you're doing, which is really cool, is that the film is available for hosting parties, correct?
Yeah. It's if you go to ingodwetrumpfilm.com, there is a place there to sign up to host a screening. Mm-hmm. So people can do that in their homes, or like we've had people do it in libraries or coffee shops or whatever. So I send them a private link to the film. They set up like a little party with people that they invite, and then everybody gets to sit and watch the movie, even though technically it's not been like officially released. Mm-hmm. So they get like a pre-screening, and then usually I'll Skype in at the end and like take part in the discussion that they have afterwards. So it's been a cool way to connect with people too.
Oh, that's really awesome. So they can sign up for that on ingodwetrumpfilm.com if they're interested. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
That's such a cool idea.
InGodWeTrump.com is something different from what I understand. Don't do that. It's InGodWeTrumpFilm.com.
So do you know, is In God We Trump, is that something that's actually like legit or pro Trumpy boy?
I just know that people have gone to it and been and said like, I don't think this is the right thing, and like told me, hey, your website's not working. But
you're right, because I just went to it and it says website coming soon.
Right. No, my website's there.
Yes. No, I know yours, not the other.
Right.
Yeah. So ingodwetrumpfilm.com, and also just I wanted you just to kind of mention a little bit like the kind of smattering of folks that you met along the way. Because you'd mentioned like professor, you talked with a professor, you talked with a bunch of other people. It's just so for people to have an idea of the varied roles of people that appear in this film.
Yeah, well, let me see. The first person that we have speaking in the film is just somebody who, she's not a political figure or anything like that. She's just somebody that I know who. She was, other than my family, she was the first person I saw the day after the election. And her, like, she was going through this very visceral response to how sad and upset she was, the same way that we were. And so she kind of starts out the film. And then we move on to somebody from the Washington Post, and then a couple different writers who write specifically critiquing evangelicalism here in America and what it's become. The professor from Auburn University that I mentioned. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's got an interesting story because he teaches a Sunday school class. He's an ordained minister. For years and years and years, he very proudly clung on to the title evangelical. He was totally fine with that, because he was only referring to its original definition. But the 2016 election was what did it for him. He won't even use that anymore because it's been so bastardized. And that his journey, even with that word and with that group, matched a lot of the people I spoke to. So yeah, different writers, clergy, all of them kind of come together and add their voices to this intricate relationship.
Nice. And so now you're on like the doorstep of your premiere at a festival. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so the actual premiere happens this Monday, President's Day, at the Big Sky Documentary Film Festival. And then it's playing again that Friday, the 23rd of February, and I'll be there. It's in Missoula, Montana. And that's it. So that's the first time that it's been publicly screened to an audience, and I'll be there in person for it.
And you're one of the finalists, correct?
Yeah, it was nominated for Best Feature at the festival, so I'll be there for the award ceremony too.
Did that surprise you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it did, because I was happily surprised just to get in, because it came after a pretty big rejection from another film festival that I'd been hoping to get into. So just getting in was huge news. And then the follow-up congratulations was huge news. So yeah, it was a good thing. I'm excited and surprised.
Was there a lot of happy dancing happening in your house when you found
No.
out about that? No?
No, it was more like no, it wasn't happy. It was just a like shocked mouth open thing. Yeah.
And the good thing is, I know I've known other filmmakers and stuff, is that you were able to go through this process and your family and marriage are still intact. So congratulations for that. Because oftentimes it's such a consuming process that you're going through.
It was a miserable summer. It was truly a miserable summer because I was editing so much and looking at all these ugly faces like day after day. I mean, literally, there was a time where I had to watch almost 2 hours of Jerry Falwell talking just to extract the little clip that I needed. It was awful, horrible, horrible. And I thought the people who watch this are never going to appreciate that the 10 seconds I pulled from this, I pulled for them so that they don't have to sit through all 2 hours of this guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't sleep well over the summer. I had headaches all summer long just from... It was not an enjoyable experience for the most part, but it was something I felt like I had to do.
Well, I just want to continue just to congratulate you for finishing this, for making this through, for also being in the Big Sky Festival and a finalist in it. That's awesome. And yeah. I mean, I think, it's going to be exciting to see what comes of this. And
yeah.
Because what little I know about the festivals, getting in one like Big Sky also helps you start to get notoriety and credibility for others as well too, especially now that you're a finalist there. So I think that it's going to be cool to see what comes of this.
Yeah, I've heard from a few pretty big distributors just from getting into the festival. They haven't even seen it yet, which is nice. So it gives me hope that at the end of this whole festival private screening journey, there's going to be a way for lots of people to see it at once, which is what I really want to happen.
Nice. That is awesome. So after all this happens, what is next for you? What's next for Chris?
Well, I was working on a narrative, like a fictional film, during the campaign season, and I had gotten fiscal sponsorship and I was working on raising a budget. The script is all done. And then I just felt like it was my patriotic duty to put that aside and take a look at what I felt was really threatening the United States and the world and my faith and all of that. So all of that I was working on has been put on the back burner. So I think once this finds its audience and once I feel like this has done as much good as it can, I will return to that and try to bring it up to the front. Nice.
Well, Chris, it's been fun for me to be, I guess, a spectator in your process of doing all of this too. And I just wish you the best of luck, especially as you're going out to Big Sky. And I look forward to further conversations. And the cool thing was through all of this is I also now have a friend. Same. So it's been really cool. It's been really fun, and I even appreciate you letting me be part of it too. So
you were a great talking head.
Yeah, but I'm more suited for radio within that talking headness. But I'm excited about it. And so if anybody is interested in GodWeTrumpFilm.com, where you can go and check out the trailer there. You can also sign up to host a party, which is a pretty cool deal. That you could do this, have a party, watch a documentary, and you get Chris to Skype in and do his own little Q&A. It's almost like your own little film festival in your house.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Chris, for being on the show, and I look forward to our conversation continuing into the future.
Sounds good, man.
Well, that's about all I've got here this hour. But when I continue to think back upon what I started with this hour, what do we as America want to be known as? I mean, I certainly hope it's not the national anthem as sung by Fergie. Oh, Sweet, sweet dear God, what was that? And if you didn't watch it, if you want to watch a train wreck, look up NBA All-Star Game, Fergie singing the national anthem. Because, oh boy, that's a train wreck. No, but I'd seen this shared a few times, and I think it's very fitting for where we're at. And it's by Brian Bilston, who has been described as the poet laureate of Twitter. And I would hope that we as a country would be known as America the Brave, or America the Free, or America the country that impeached Trump. Any of those are good. But this poem, I think, spoke a lot about what's going on and where we're at right now at this moment in history. It's entitled, America is a Gun. England is a cup of tea. France, a wheel of ripened brie. Greece, a short, squat olive tree. America is a gun. Brazil is football on the sand. Argentina, Maradona's hand. Germany, an Oompa band. America is a gun. Holland is a wooden shoe. Hungary, a goulash stew. Australia, a kangaroo. America is a gun. Japan is a thermal spring. Scotland, a Highland fling. Oh, better to be anything than America as a gun. Well, as I end this hour here, I just want to go ahead and tell you guys that we've got a bunch of other cool interviews coming up in the queue in the near future. I won't spoil them yet, but I'm actually quite excited about some folks we have lined up here to be on the show. And as I send you out here, just reminding you as we end this broadcast that you can always catch us on podcasts at www.snarkyfaith.com. We're also on Facebook and Twitter. Just look up Snarky Faith. And just want to go ahead and continue to say thank you. Thank you for being a part of this project, this process, this experiment, whatever the hell we call this thing that is Snarky Faith. I can't do this without you guys. If you ever want to reach out to me, send me emails at questions@snarkyfaith.com. I love to hear from our listeners. We love you guys, and move out into this world with grace and peace. I'll be back again next week. Thank you so much.
WCOM is listener-supported community radio, and Snarky Faith is only possible through our sponsors. Lumen, a spiritual community of seekers, sojourners, question askers, doubters, and skeptics, is a collective of fellow travelers that embrace the truth that all of life is sacred, hope is real, and tomorrow can be a better day than today. All are welcome. You can find more information at www.lumencommunities.com.